Hello, everyone. I'm John Higgins, contributing writer to Film and TV Now, and I'm delighted to welcome one and all to this interview special with composer and musician Kim Halliday, whose latest work is Babylon, which was released in 6 parts over the course of 2 months by the Unpleasantville label. Now, this momentous musical tapestry focuses on 3 key events from pre-Christian history: the Hanging Gardens, the Tower of Babel, and the Great Flood. Kim, a warm welcome to you.
Hiya, how you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
I'm
So,
very pleased with Momentous, thank you.
yeah, no, I think it. When I read it, I was like, "Blimey, I've got to learn more." So given the context of this work, I mean, what fascinates you about the fusion of music and religion?
Well, it's not really the fusion of music. Well, it's more the fusion of music and stories. And there's an interesting part. The thing that I'm interested in is syncretism, which is this business of where, in olden times, pre-Christian times, when groups of people enslaved other groups of people, they were quite tolerant about their religion. So for example, in Bath, where the baths are to the goddess Sulis Minerva. Sulis is the English god, the Angles god, or the Celts god, I guess, and Minerva is the Roman god. So the Romans, rather than saying, "Oh no, you've got to pray to Minerva," they said, "Oh yeah, we've got the same as Sulis. She's called Minerva. We call her Minerva," and they kind of mashed together all these religions. And the other thing that I discovered, because I was doing research about Bath for an earlier project, was that there's these ancient Mesopotamian stories about floods. Every culture has a flood story. Every culture has a creation story. Almost every major religion ever had a hell or a purgatory of some kind, or a bridge or a gate. And Christianity is littered with the kind of detritus of earlier religions, which I find really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then because I got interested in that, and I'm interested in, many years ago, decades ago, I was involved in a project about Stonehenge that never got finished, which I regret that it never got finished, because I became interested in all that kind of Neolithic stuff and what they were up to and why they did it. And, principally, I suppose my initial thing was, and whether they did it to music. I've always had this kind of soundtrack going on in my head, and I wonder about what happened before people could make that music. So it is an interest of mine anyway.
Okay. So obviously, given the vastness of the Bible as a publication, inevitably we could go into a conversation where we could talk for hours about the Bible itself. I mean, it's there. But why
Yeah.
did you want to focus on the pre-Christian history for this project?
I think it's just because I was interested in that kind of, interested in the Epic of Gilgamesh is what it comes to, and that early story that's then become part of all these different religions, which indicates that, I don't know whether it indicates that the authors of these religious books, and it's not just the Bible, were stealing stories from each other, or whether there is some truth in some of this stuff. This is the thing. There were floods in Mesopotamia, and there's physical evidence of floods in China as well, another set of religions with a flood myth. So I'm kind of interested in that. Just what is going on here. I'm just interested in whether there's any truth in it or not. And some of it I find a bit alarming. I mean, the Tower of Babel, which features in Babylon, the story of the Tower of Babel is that God and the angels saw men building a big tower, kind of went, well, we're going to put a stop to that, and went down and gave them all different religions so they could no longer communicate. And you sort of go, that seems like a very capricious thing to do. So I set it to music to try and get myself to understand it, which is my kind of standard MO. Don't understand something, go play a guitar, see if that comes out.
Okay.
It's never worked, by the way. It's never improved my understanding, but it makes me feel better.
Well, let's go for something a little closer to your heart and home, which is actually about your style. Now, I was reading this up. Now, as I understand it, it's a mix of story, trip hop, hauntology, and post rock. Now, quite a combination there. I mean, what is the start-off point when you're composing? I mean, do you go for one particular thing, or is the story that influences the music, or does the music come to you in a muse or whatever?
It's an interesting journey, because I studied at the London Film. Well, first of all, I learned to play the guitar as an act of rebellion. So that was, 1970 something, 74. I started learning to play the guitar, and it was definitely an act of rebellion triggered by seeing Alice Cooper on Top of the Pops. So all the grown-ups in the room went, and I went, oh, no, I want to do that. And then after years of being in bands and unsuccessful bands and less successful bands, I kind of went, oh, I need to do this. I've got this music in my head the whole time. So I went to the London International Film School. It was then. It's the London Film School now. I learned to write to picture. So a lot of what I've done has been because somebody said to me, I need this music to either be X or to support Y, to show that the character is transitioning. And it's quite a tight brief. And I've been doing that for a long time. So even if you're scoring a documentary, there has to be, you can't just have a happy tune if there's somebody, miserable in the documentary. You're not going to have, the Benny Hill music over a lion eating a deer. So you have to work to a brief. And I quite like that. I think I've discovered in later years that part of the reason I like that is no one ever says that would have been a great film if it wasn't for the composer. They say that about the director. It's the director's fault. And so I don't have to bear any responsibility for this, but obviously you give up some creative control, I guess. Overdoing it a bit, but that's where it comes from.
Oh yeah, I mean,
but then obviously,
yeah.
No, go.
Yeah, just saying that it's. I mean, moving on. Actually, I mean, you've actually answered one of the next question was what you initially learned music on, which was the guitar. So you've answered that one. So I thought, great, I can put that to one side. But what's interesting is I was looking for the notes. I haven't heard the work anyway, but what I noticed was in each of the 6 parts of Babylon, there is a track that you've stated as Kim's story. Now, yeah. I'm just curious to know the context and the intention. What was the kind of, how, in terms of making it that your own story, I mean, how does it fit in the context of this particular work?
So the stories about there are 6, obviously there's 6 pieces. So 2 of them are about the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. So one is an introduction, which is about the history of whether that existed or not. And then the second one is more just an observation that the other 7 wonders of the ancient world did exist. There was a Colossus at Rhodes. And so it seems a bit odd that the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, which they've never found, doesn't exist when all the others did. So I'm pinning my hopes on the fact that Nebuchadnezzar did build this place because his wife was sad and missed her home. So I kind of like that. And then the other pieces there's the piece about the Tower of Babel, where I'm observing, as we just discussed, the advisability of believing in a God whose mind works that way. And then there's a piece about the floods, because I like the idea that there's all these different flood myths. There's a piece about archaeology, really, but it's more about I lost my mum at the beginning of last year, although she was 86, so it wasn't unexpected. But it's mixed up with the fact that archaeology is just digging people's lives out of the mud. And then the last piece, which I had a conversation with my granddaughter, who, when she was 6, about dinosaurs and heaven. So I'm going to leave your listeners to go and find Babylon 6 to find out how that went. But it's one of those small child teaches very old person quite a lot in a very short time stories. So okay. That's what the stories are.
So my next question is a combination of 2, because I was looking up that you've been compared to the following, which is Bernard Herrmann, David Bowie, Massive Attack, and Sonic Youth. And I just wanted to tap into your musical influences. How important were they? And were there other people that you kind of, certainly as a composer, because in terms of the composers that we've seen over the years, the legendary film composers, I suppose, and just classical, I mean, tell us a bit more about that, how they impacted on your life.
I can't understate how much David Bowie. I couldn't overdo it. David Bowie has been part of my life, the whole of my life, really. And I am kind of obsessively, slightly fanatical about everything. So I know that Herbert Sumlin played guitar on Smokestack Lightning by Howlin' Wolf. And I have all these facts in my head about all these bands. And I never, ever did that with David Bowie. I just consumed from the time I first heard probably Starman, I guess. But I can remember Space Odyssey. And he's just was part of my life the whole time. And some of it I didn't like. I wasn't a big fan of Tin Machine. I'm not. I don't listen to Let's Dance, but you know everything else he did, I loved. So I don't think uh, his style has influenced me, but the fact that he keeps reinventing himself and changing and doing those things, I think that did influence me a lot. I love trip hop because I liked the kind of mashing up of reggae and beats, and so Massive Attack were a big influence on me. And Bernard Herrmann, when I first started looking at film music, the fact that Bernard Herrmann had written the music to picture, so that there's a long piece at the beginning of Citizen Kane that ends in the hand opening up on the snow globe and it falling to the floor, and it goes through the titles, and the music is all running through to it. And then in time with the music, as the snow globe drops, the music all goes bump. And so they've worked it backwards. And, you know, it fits the picture, but it's also time to hit those notes in the picture. And that's a bit of a lost art. That's becoming a lost art because that's not the way films are scored anymore. But that was an enormous influence on me. And also, you know, the music for Psycho and Taxi Driver is very disturbing and out of its time completely, which I've always loved. So I was very pleased that people compared me to Bernard Herrmann. Mm-hmm. And I was very pleased when people compared me to David Bowie. Sonic Youth was a band that were big at a time when I wasn't really listening to that kind of music. So I had to, when somebody said, "Oh, it sounds like Sonic Youth," I'm oh God, I didn't know I was doing that. But I think it's probably more about that sub pop kind of thing, you know, that I often do.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things that's happened to me recently was when Andy Gill from the Gang of Four died. I listened to Entertainment by the Gang of Four again. And if you'd have said to me, who are your guitar heroes? I would have said Jimmy Page and, you know, those kind of Jimi Hendrix, those kind of people. But actually, I've stolen a lot of Andy Gill's techniques in what I do in terms of that kind of choppy guitar thing. So I think if you're interested in music, you can't help it all going in, and then sometimes it comes out and you touch your forelock and hope they're not going to sing.
Yeah, I mean it's great. I mean I have to agree with you. I mean I love North by Northwest. I mean and also I loved Herman's music for the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad as well, which was you know, because again it's so against the grain, but it's so lovely. I mean the different contexts. So talking on to films, I mean you recently did the score for I Am Gen Z, I should say, which was screened at the Manchester International Film Festival. And tell us little bit about the collaboration and process on that film, and what was the brief.
That was really interesting because it was during lockdown. They were editing it during lockdown, and the producer Chantal de Carvalho, I've known for longer than either of us care to mention. And she sent me an email saying, "Oh, I've passed some of your music to Liz, the director of I Am Gen Z, who's cutting the film, and I've asked, is it okay if she cuts to it?" Which of course is, you know, that's a fantastic thing for a composer, because what normally happens is they cut it to something else, normally Arvo Pärt, and then they come to me and say, "Can you make it sound like Arvo Pärt?" I did a short film for a friend of mine, and he had Eau Claire de la Lune. Like, "Can you make something that sounds like that?" Well, probably not, Dave, because if I could, I would have by now. So Liz started editing the film to pieces that I'd written a few years before. And then when we sat down together, I said, "Well, look, I can change these. I can speed them up and slow them down and, you know, move them around a bit and change the arrangement so that it dips under dialogue and all those sort of things, which, you know, as a film composer, that's what I'm paid to do." And so I started tailoring the pieces, and then she had quite a lot of music from Gen Z performers in the film. And so I started talking to them about what they need to send us in terms of, you know, artifacts and the legal things of it and what files we need and all that sort of stuff. And then that became more collaborations with some of those in order to use their music as part of the score. And then finally, we were writing pieces of music to replace things that were in TikTok. So there's quite a lot of clips from TikTok and Instagram and social media in the film. And of course, you know, it's quite hard to get permission from Dr. Dre to use some of these pieces. So we had to make something that captured that, but wasn't that. So it was all the things that I do. It was bespoke music because there was bespoke music in it. It was tailoring pieces that I'd already written. So it kind of just dropped into my lap in a really lovely way.
Mm-hmm. And let's going back to the more personal things. And in Babylon, you reflect. You've mentioned about your mother. I mean, you earlier, and you've also mentioned your grandchild or grandchildren. I mean, how much of a guide and influence has your mother been in your? How much was she in your personal and professional development as an artist?
In my professional development, not at all, outside of the fact that she had uh, lots of 78s and a dance set record player. My dad was in the Navy, so he was away a lot. And then when he left the Navy, he got another job where he was away quite a lot, not for quite such a long time. But and so we were allowed to play their records basically. So I grew up listening to 78. So some of it was rock and roll. My mum was born in 1936, so she was a bit old for rock and roll, though she loved Johnny Ray and Ted Heath and his orchestra. So I grew up listening to a lot of kind of swing, I suppose. But we were always allowed to play those things, and so there was always music in my life. And she loved the Beatles as well. So that if the radio was on, you know, in my earliest recollections, there's normally a Beatles song playing because the radio was on, and obviously they were on the radio the whole time. So in terms of nurturing my career, not much, but in terms of making it possible for me to do that sort of stuff, absolutely, she was a big influence. And my dad as well, because I was learning to play a Spanish guitar, and there was an electric guitar in the guitar shop. And my dad said, "Well, if you save half the money, I'll give you the other half." So they were always very supportive of what I was up to. But they had no background in any of it, so they couldn't give me any good advice or anything
Okay,
outside
so
of get a proper job.
well, that's always the way. The problem is you. It's strange. It never works out. Same for me, really.
Yeah,
So there's another release. The previous release you did was Desiderium. Is that how I pronounce it?
I think it's Desiderium.
Desiderium. Okay, so I
Yeah,
apologize.
yeah. No,
Now,
no, no.
oh no, it's
I
all
do
right.
it to
And it's
myself.
yeah, sorry about that. Now, this one is semi-autobiographical. So tell us a little bit about the significance of the title and also a bit more about what the context of the work is compared to Babylon.
So Babylon is really a sort of an annex to it. So Desiderium, during lockdown, just before lockdown, I was planning on an Unpleasantville event. So it would have been a club, and I'm interested in augmented reality and mixed reality. So we were going to. The plan was we would project things onto the walls of this building, probably a pop-up shop, and turn it into from an art gallery to a video gallery, and then to a club, and then have live performers on in a very small space. So it would have been. I wasn't planning on replacing Glastonbury or anything like that. It was going to be a shop in Stokescroft in Bristol, and then there was Brexit, and then there was lockdown, and it all got shoveled off. And so I was thinking about small scale things that I could do in a particular area. And I discovered geolocation, which is where you can have people walking around and can only hear the piece in the right place. And so I started to think about that. And then I kind of decided that I needed a story to go with it. So I wrote a kind of ghost story, I suppose is what it is. I hope is what it is. About when I was a teenager. So a lot of what the story in Desiderium is true, and a lot of it is just made up. But I grew up on a council estate in Basingstoke, which is that's where Pleasantville comes from. And so it's about the long hot summers, of 75 and 76 and what happened there. In the context of, as we discussed, I'm quite interested in Neolithic barrows and the English Civil War and all sorts of other things. So Desiderium is a piece of non-fiction based fiction, and then Babylon kind of follows on from those same engineering, that same technology and engineering. So I did it again,
Well,
but in a smaller way.
yeah. I've got two final questions for you before we wrap up. What would you like to explore? How do you see yourself? How do you see the next project after this one? I mean, is it going to be like an epic, like 6 parts, or are you going to be more experimental? How do you see the next project?
So, well, there's four on the go, really. Liz and Chantal are making another documentary that they've asked me to do the music for. So I can't say anything about that because I don't know. But I mean, so there'll be another film. I'm working with an author called Scott Harrison, who lives in Whitby up north, who's writing sci-fi horror films, short stories, which I'm putting together with music. So we're both feeding off each other, which is quite an interesting process. So he writes a bit of a story, I write a bit of music to go with it. He writes a bit more, I read the story and write a bit more music. So that's taking a little while, but I'm excited about that one. It's kind of like War of the World, Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds meets Stranger Things. That's what we're hoping for. And then I'm working on a couple of pieces which are again geolocated, and also with augmented reality. So that immersive and interactive thing interests me. And the technology, while currently quite expensive, is getting cheaper. So I'm quite interested in audiences coming and being able to influence the sound of what is playing. So I've got a couple of projects on the go that are looking at that. And then of course I'll have half an hour while I'm waiting for a backup to finish or something, and I'll knock out some tune in that, and then we'll follow that up, and it'll go off in a completely different way.
And my final
and there's always the possibility that Francis Ford Coppola will phone me up and say, "Do you want to do this film?" So that would be good.
Well, I think your music might well fit in if he does another Apocalypse Now, the Ultimate Redux. I don't know, but you know, I don't think he never. Trouble is, he's never truly finished that project in over 40 years. So
I was going to say it's going to be Apocalypse when, isn't it?
Yeah, but who knows? I mean, 2029 will probably be an ultimate. There'll be another version. So the final question I want to ask you is, what are you most proud of about your career so far?
I think there's been a few moments when I kind of went, yeah, that was all right. I cracked it there. I'm pleased with Desiderium. I'm pleased with I Am Gen Z. I liked I Am Gen Z. I did a horror film a few years ago called Credo, which had Stephen Gately and Maya Buring in it, which never really got the recognition it deserved, or the audience it deserved either. Come to that, so I'd like something to happen with that, but it's not going to now. I think the thing is, you have to take a crumb of comfort, don't you, where you can. Is the thing. So the first time I saw my name on the screen at the National Film Theatre in London, that was a big moment, and I was pleased with those sort of things. So I don't. My expectation is quite low in terms of what's going to happen, but I kind of recognise when I've done, decent work. I like doing decent work.
Well, Kim, thank you so much for your time and insights today. It's been an absolutely fascinating journey. I mean, I certainly will be determined to see what these Babylon certainly is, because I'm curious about it myself. So wrapping up, everyone, Babylon is available on download, podcasts, and streaming services, as well as at www.unpleasantville.com. And of course, you can also go to Kim's official website, kimhalliday.com. And you can check out the stuff as well. Finally, to wrap up, if you want to watch a replay of this interview, you can watch it on my YouTube channel, John Higgins Film Review. And for more articles, interviews, and reviews, you can go to www.filmandtvnow.com. And of course, I've just launched a new film resource website, www.whatmovie.co.uk. So thank you very much again, Kim, and thank you for watching.
Thank you.